To manage our Azure SQL Database from SQL Server Management Studio, we first need to configure the server in Azure to accept a connection from our client IP address. To do that, we need to be in the old Management Studio rather than the new Azure portal. The Management Studio still does a few things better than the portal does, and one of them is configuring SQL Server firewall rules. As you can see, I've gone ahead and pulled up my SQL Databases tab, and I'm in the server part of that dialog. I'm going to go ahead and click on the SQL Server that we're going to configure, and then I'm going to click on Configure to get the allowed IP addresses. This is my current IP address. It's the one I want to allow, so I'm going to go ahead and click on this button that says Add to the Allowed IP Addresses. When I do that, the address is listed. If I click on Save, the firewall is updated to allow my connection. As you can see, it doesn't take very long. With that configuration step made, my next step is to go ahead and get the connection string information for the database I want to connect to. I can do that by clicking on Databases, then selecting the database to which I want to connect, then clicking on Dashboard, and finally clicking on Show Connection Strings. What I'm really after is the host and the user ID for this particular database. So I'm going to go ahead and select the ADO.NET connection string, and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go ahead and open up Notepad++. You can use any old text editor you want. And I'm going to paste in the values that I'm going to pirate to make my connection. I've gone ahead and opened the SQL Server. Now I need to go ahead and copy in the connection information. For the server name, that's the qualified name that I copied from the connection string, which I put in here. For authentication scheme, I want to choose SQL Server Authentication. I'll need the username, which generally includes the server name when I'm trying to connect to an Azure server. And then I need the password. This password is the one you use when you first set up the server. I'll click on Remember Password and then Connect. As you can see, I've successfully connected. My server is showing up in the Object Explorer. Now I'm just going to wait for the database and security tabs to fill out. And there they are. If I'm using SQL Server Management Studio 2016, I can not only connect to an Azure database from my local machine that's in the cloud, I can also take a database that's on my local machine and send that database to Azure through a wizard. To launch that, I first choose the database I want to send out. In this case, it's going to be AdventureWorks, a local copy of it I have. I right-click on it, choose Tasks, and then Deploy Database to Microsoft Azure SQL Database. I'll go ahead and click Next. I'm asked to go ahead and connect to the Azure server where I want to deploy this database. It's going to be the same one that we just connected to, so I'll just click Connect. As you can see, I've made that connection. I'm now asked to give a name to the database once it's deployed to Azure. AdventureWorks 2012 will be fine. I'm asked to choose a version, an edition of the database. That's either the basic, standard, or premium level of service. I'll choose standard. As you can see, that's automatically swaps over to the maximum 250 gigabyte size of the standard tier of service. And I'm asked to choose a machine size. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose an SO. Everything else looks okay, so I'll click on Next. When I do that, what will happen is the machine will connect to Azure briefly to make sure it can provision the database as I've asked. Let me caution you here that there's something wrong with my install of SQL Server Management Studio, so I'm not going to be able to complete this wizard, but the steps involved are still the same. But finishing the walkthrough, you can see Azure has gone ahead and made sure that everything can be provisioned using the values I gave, and as soon as I click the Finish button, it will actually proceed to execute. Again, unfortunately there's something wrong with my install. I've got a bad copy of DAC. Since I've got a bad copy of DAC, I can't complete this. I've tried to fix it. It's taking a little too long, but the basics of this demo are still the same. If your install isn't as messed up as mine is, it'll work.